Hello and welcome to the two-man power trip of wrestling. I'm your host, JP John Poz. With me today, very, very special guest, formerly known as America's Heartthrob or the Boss, of course, two-time NWA United States Heavyweight Champion. He is Mr. Magnum TA. Magnum, welcome to two-man power trip. Well, welcome back. How you doing?
You know what? Always a pleasure to talk to you guys.
So, what's going on in your world? What's the kind of the latest? What have you been up to?
Well, the latest is Greg Gagne and Steve Rosenthal are like running me crazy because I have a full-time job in the telecom industry that takes up like more hours in the day than I have time to do it, and I've been hastily working on in the background on PowerTown Wrestling with those guys, promoting the series one of our first line of figures depicting the legends of wrestling, and it's quite an adventure.
That is awesome. How did that all happen? How did it all come about? Because the figures look amazing.
Well, that's a testimony to amazing, talented sculptors that Steve Rosenthal had brought into the group from his past history. A fellow named Andy Frank, who is world class in doing those 3D sculptures. So the guys approached me basically a year ago last June and asked me if I'd like to be part of a collectible series they were doing on Legends of Wrestling, and I was flattered to be asked. And Greg and I are old friends, so I jumped on board to have them do some memorabilia for me. And the next thing I knew, I was involved in bigger talks about the grand scheme of things and the potential of how large an audience there was out there that would appreciate this, and also the large number of people that Greg and I both knew that could benefit by being part of this roster and this team.
Man, they just look unreal. When I first saw them, I was like, "Yeah, it's probably not real." Like, I don't know if they'll be able to get it, but it is real, and they're amazing.
Well, I'm always one of those, the proofs in the pudding kind of guys. As I saw it unfold and develop and what they were creating, I started getting excited about it. Then when I saw the detail we were going into with the intricacies of the jackets and the vests and the robes and the belts, and then I really got interested because I know the authenticity part of it is such a in demand piece for the true connoisseur kind of these things. So we reached out to Dave Milliken, who owns the rights to all the Reggie Park designs for over the years, and we got into a working agreement with him to authenticate and license what we were doing of the belts that Reggie had his hands on, and it just keeps it keeps morphing into this bigger and bigger thing. So yeah, the detail for the heads are just absolutely amazing, like something would come out of a museum piece, kind of crazy good. And the scale, the authenticity, trying to be close to the actual stature is something that I don't think anybody else has really strived for in the industry. Matter of fact, I've got a figure of Dusty and I that Mattel did, and Dusty was a good 2, 3 inches shorter than me, and his figure is about makes it look like he's about 6'6" and I'm 5'10" or something. So yeah, the big boys struggle with that and keeping those things in scale too. So I think we're starting off on the right foot, trying to give a unique depiction of what can be created with modern technology today.
That's the first thing I noticed about Brody. I was like, okay, obviously he is tall, a little bit taller than Stan Hansen, but in the figure, he's a little taller than Stan Hansen, so it makes sense. It's like, wow, they nailed it on that.
Yeah, and this is the beginning. I mean, I'm sure we're going to get constructive feedback from the collectors. After we get this first series out and they get it in their hands, and we're very attuned to listening to wanting to I mean, we can't satisfy everybody's little nuance out there that might be, but nonetheless, we have a very educated consumer, and we're going to be careful to listen to that and take advantage of those notes because it can be beneficial for everybody.
So there's going to be not season, I guess series number 2.
Yes, there will be, good Lord willing, there'll be series 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right on along. We've got a plethora of talent and people that have made such a mark in wrestling history, all the way back to the 50s. And we're looking at all kinds of different ways to make these characters come back alive for people that don't even know their history, don't even know about them. I mean, I was a fan of wrestling when I was young and read lots of things about it, and of course, amateur wrestling before that. So I was always like researching and interested in those kind of things. And people today, the older generation, they certainly remember, but we got a whole new generation that only knows of what they can see on YouTube or the WWE network, or what archives are out there. And there's a wealth of other archives, that are available to show the earliest stages of television when when Greg's dad Vern was just coming on the scene as a young man, and a amazing talented amateur wrestler out of the Olympics, and bursting into this scene. And wrestling has helped what put television on the map. So it's some great stories to tell, and a host of just bigger than life personalities that blazed a trail, laying the foundations for what folks enjoy today in quote unquote sports entertainment.
It's funny because Vern, one of the first TV stars, legit TV stars in the 50s and 60s, it's like, wow, like now there's a figure of him. People learn their history, and then even further back than him, a little bit further back. But Lou Thez, another guy. If you're a wrestling historian or a wrestling fan, you know those names very well, or you should know them very well. Two of the pillars of really what we have in wrestling today. Without them to start it off, I don't know, how the lineage kind of continues. So that's awesome. You guys have those two as two of the big names in the pack.
And there's lots of guys to honor and lots of stories to tell, and we're creating a platform to be able to share those stories and memories, with the fans as we do this. And it's going to be, it's not just going to be chronological. We'll have samplings from different eras with each run that we come out with, so it won't be like you've just got to crawl out of the 50s into the 60s. We'll be giving samplings, of each of those eras, and we've got a great representation of women, and as well as the little people that grace the big square circle with us, that used to go on tour with Andre, and had some really entertaining matches, particularly in the 60s and 70s.
If you look at it, obviously it's Lou Thez, Vern Gagne, Stan Hansen, Magnum TA, yourself, Kevin Von Erich, or excuse me, Kerry Von Erich, and Brody. Did I mention Brody? So Brody,
Yep,
Hansen. Okay, so that's the six, right? So far.
right. So we've got three. We've got three representing the National Wrestling Alliance, and Kerry and I and Lou, and Stan and Vern and Brody are more from the AWA era. Although they all wrestled. Stan and Brody wrestled all over the world, and certainly were it made an impact in the NWA as well. But we kind of broke it up like in an association alliance kind of thing, and it's pretty cool.
Who got to pick those six?
Well, it was a ongoing conversation because I wasn't initially cast in that first iteration. I don't even know exactly how it pivoted over to me, but there were so many names that were all over the place, and there was so many names that have been, a lot of the guys that we have that kind of in that 80s, 90s era, some of those guys had been done. So I've had the one figure that Mattel did 10 years ago, and it was not the adaptation of me where I transitioned over to the red tights, and certainly didn't represent the U.S. heavyweight title with it. So it seemed like on paper, because of the sheer uniqueness of it, that it made sense. And Carrie and I were were very much in the kind of in the mainstream at the same time in the mid 80s. We last picture of Kerry and I was at Kaminsky Park, coincidentally enough, and Vern's big extravaganza that he did there. And I wrestled Flair for the world title on the, I'm not sure who Kerry wrestled, but that was the last picture of he and I together. And I'd known him and all his brothers and spent a lot of good time with them down in Florida and in Texas and when I was in Mid South. So a lot of mutual respect and love and kind of family kind of atmosphere between us and them.
Love the Von Erichs. Great that Kerry is a part of that because one of the all-time greats, definitely. And it's awesome that you're a part of it. I mean, you should be a part of that first set because obviously one of the all-time greats, and that's the '80s wheelhouse right there, or early '80s to mid '80s wheelhouse. You and Kerry.
Well, it built that momentum that took things, like to yet another level. I mean, obviously, I had a very untimely career-ending accident in October of '86, but I literally, from a hospital bed, watched in 5 months the whole landscape, evolve from big, huge arena business to pay-per-view business, which changed the industry completely. And we went from packing arenas and putting 10 and 12,000 people in them to being able to reach out to millions of people that were paying to see an event, worldwide. And the industry just exploded. And we owe a lot of that to Vince because Vince was pushing pushing the envelope and spreading out into new areas and creating a fan base that weren't traditional wrestling fans. And it just opened up the globe to everybody that wanted to go out and get a piece of that action.
What did you think about Vince retiring?
Well, I think he deserves to retire. He certainly, put in more time and made a, impact on the industry that'll, I don't think anybody will ever surpass what his mark and what he's done in the history books. So, I think when you've worked that hard and created as many memorable moments as he has, you deserve a little time to sit back and just enjoy it and watch the fruits of your labor out there continuing to flourish.
With that accident in October of 1986, before that happened, did you know like you were headed for the main event of Starcade? Like, were you told like where you were going to be if that hadn't happened? Like, what the future kind of held for you, or the
The
immediate
ti-
future
the
at that
title
point?
the title had been had totally been decided that I was going to get a run with the title. I mean, getting a run with the title and what you do with it when you get that run, we can guess about it till the cows come home. But I mean, I really felt that I was ready for the opportunity. And it was a little different than, say, Rick, when Rick first got his opportunity for the world title. He was having to travel to New Zealand and Japan and, all over the world, defending the title against everybody and their brother because there was all these territories and all these parts of the NWA. When I was being groomed to step in that role, there was really only two players in the world, and one was Jim Crockett, the other was Vince McMahon. So although I would have still had the responsibilities of that title, it would have been controlled much more strategically where I went and who I wrestled against and who I was representing, to the world, my capabilities by the Crockett's because the territories had ceased to be a power in in what was going on as everything transitioned.
So, did they tell you like when though? Was it definitely going to be Starcade
No,
'86?
they didn't say when, and the thing was is the way Dusty and I was with Dusty every day and saw his creative vision and the way things are happening and everybody thinks, oh, it would have been Starcade, '86, and we could have done it in a house show. I mean, it was, see, the 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 mega show pay-per-view thing hadn't blown to the ceiling. Flair and I might had a rematch in a Starcade where I would have defended it back against him, and we might have just rolled on TBS one Saturday morning with, with me having unbuttoning my vest, and there it would be, and if you weren't in the arena, you wouldn't have seen it because it was still that kind of mentality back there that we controlled our own destiny. We didn't have to, you know, we would control how the people perceived it and then, change the narrative after the fact. But, I don't know that it would have been the pay-per-view. It could have been, it could have been before it or after it.
To me, I'm always curious, like how it gets decided you're going to be champ. I mean, obviously, you were super over. You look like $1 million. U.S. title. Then it should be the next phase would be the world title. But does that get decided by Dusty? Is it Jim Crockett Jr.? Is it Flair saying that he's going to like? How does that all get decided? Like that you're going to be the next champ or you're the next guy?
Then at that time, the alliance was still in place. Okay, it was still a group of people that vote on it, and so I had gone to we'd had the NWA big meeting in Vegas that year, and they had me come speak at it and kind of, you know, getting folks' approval and whatnot. And I think that was in the summer of '86, and I believe the Crockett's and Dusty flew me up to New York and took me out in New York and told me the decision had been made and what we were going to do. And again, we didn't talk about the where or the when. They had a different concept of the business, and it's comical to say now because obviously, we can see what Rick's gone on to do, but they didn't want a 37-year-old champion. They wanted a 20-some-year-old champion, and they wanted that to be the marquee, the one that carried the load for the business as far as representing the Crockett promotion. That's what they wanted. They wanted that youth movement. They recognized Rick's undeniable talent in his abilities, but they were already looking at him as like a quote unquote like a Jack Nicholas type, you know, uh, character and being the golden bear. They one of them called him, in always being in the mix and all those things. But as we all can tell today, as Rick has wrestled, through 5 decades, nothing would have stopped him if they had done that and and things had gone well. And that would have been the question because at the time I was a babyface and there would have been no plan to turn me heel. And, aside from Hogan being champion, it's not historical for a babyface to carry the title for long periods of time. So I was, if you noticed, I was kind of a heel babyface kind of character anyway, in that, I knocked out the president of the NWA because he, irritated me over a comment about my mom.
Yep.
And I was fringing on that, what became the Attitude Era. So I would have probably, been a more aloof type character that I would have only had alliance with Dusty and nobody else, and I probably could have worked with different people as a result of that, and not quote unquote ever been a heel, but edgy enough that I could have gone out there and had a match with Ricky Morton or somebody like that, and had a something that stirred everybody's excitement up and say, "Ooh, that's different," and wouldn't have had to gone and nut shotted somebody or done something like that, but just the attitude of it could have carried that flavor.
Did you like being the shade of gray a little bit? Because like the boss isn't the, eat your vitamins, say your prayers kind of guy. I mean, he was a little edgy, a little bit gray, a little bit like an old Western cowboy that's not going to, listen to the sheriff in town, like that
Yeah,
kind of
because
character.
my heroes were Clint Eastwood and John Wayne and Charles Bronson, and they were always that edgy kind of character. They weren't just singing zippity doo dah and skipping around, just like yeah, I mean, and there's place for that. There's baby faces that can be that, but that wasn't. As I developed this persona and this character, and then was honing it, and just really, just starting to test the things that I could do. I was more and more comfortable in that fighting, brawling, scowl on my face kind of mode, and and I just it's a crying shame because I just started that program with Jimmy Garvin and Precious, and Jimmy is oh one of the one of the best workers you'd ever want to be in the ring with. So and he could talk. I mean, he could talk and make himself likable, even though you wanted to kill him at the same time, because he was just that entertaining. And Patty was perfect, one with him. And I could just imagine, what he and I could have done, had I snagged that title off of Flair, and the program I could have had with him could have been just absolutely insane, and never even got to really test the waters on that to see where it could have gone. But that was my last match, was with Jimmy in a lumberjack match in Greenville, South Carolina.
So it almost seems like he was the build up to Flair, but that wasn't said though. That just was assumed by everyone.
Yeah, and that's and that was part of the reason. It was a twofold thing. So the series with Nikita was for me, in my mind, was my graduation test. So I'm in a program with a big, rough, rugged, intense, believable heel who who his credibility was, not even in question, but his experience was, not that long in the business. So to be suddenly, at this time I'm not quite 7 years I've been in the business, and I'm in this program. And of course, we have Ivan out there that helped Nikita tremendously and guiding him. But I mean, it was just him and I in that ring, working that series, and we put some 30, 45 minute matches together that that were, you know, really good work. And for me, that was my, yeah, I can. If I got to general it and it's on me, and I'm giving somebody that wants it bad, I can go out there and have a great match. And a champion's got to be able to do that. It's got to be able to go out there with anybody and have a contest that holds up and believable.
That best of seven with you and Nikita is awesome. I mean, that's one of the great like Dusty booking things because he's kind of on the come up, looks like $1 million. You're on the come up, going to be obviously building yourself way up the ladder. But like you said, he was very green. But it's one of the things. It's like, okay, he's playing this Russian character. He's tied with Ivan during the Cold War. Like, so he's going to be a huge heel, and he looks like a super villain. Like, it's like he's like the perfect storm, and as long as you can carry him.
Yeah, and the thing is, and he had to have people around him that would continue that mystique. And it's like it's so weird. It was like this amazing thing that they turned him babyface when I had the tragedy deal. But how much better might it have been? And can you imagine? Can you imagine Magnum Nikita 2? This time him the U.S. champion, me the world champion, and that clash, and him still, being the big monster and being, staying in that character, because he was not protected, in my estimation, by the heels on the other side of the fence when he went babyface to maintain him in that light. And he hadn't been through the hundreds of matches that I'd been in on top, working with really seasoned pros that may or may not want to take care of you. And if they don't want to take care of you, you need to know how to take care of yourself. And that only comes from experience. So he got thrust into, he had to completely, switch his whole deal, his gears, and go in this, superpowers, thing with this bigger than life American Dream Dusty Rhodes. And it was great, don't get me wrong, but it had that other path, kept being able to go on that linear pace that he was on with the heat that he was carrying. There's no telling, where his career would have continued to go.
Yeah, because it was almost like he wasn't quite ready for what they were gonna give him, and then, like you said, like, he was much better in the heel role, but then once you changed it, it does change everything. I know he ended up feuding with Flair and getting a big world title match, but he wasn't quite the same, he wasn't that
Well,
monster.
the thing is, I was 245 pounds. He was 295 pounds. I could get away with selling and fighting from the bottom up when I'm out there with guys that are 40, 50 pounds bigger than me. But he was so big that the match that stands out to me, I watched it television on home and I just shook my head. It was and no, and don't take this wrong against anybody I'm talking about because it just is what it is. But he was in a match with Mike Rotundo on television, and I was watching the match, and Mike, great amateur wrestler out of Syracuse. I mean, great hand, experienced, everything. He was in the varsity club, of course, and I don't know whether it was for the world television title or what it was, but I just looked and I said, that doesn't even look like the same guy I worked with. It doesn't even. I mean, if I just squinted my eyes and was watching this match, I would never know who that was. And they changed his in-ring, you know, air so much in being a babyface that it was just it was wasted to me because again, to me, it was that moment was great, but it would also have been great to see him go back and switch back heel and turn around and say, Tolata and drop an elbow on Dusty and put the boots to him. I mean, it, because he was just a great heel. I mean, just you know, the press conference with my mom where we were there and Ivan was there at the signing and I ended up going across the table. I mean, my mom wasn't smart to the business and she sold that thing like I had just been jumped by two thugs and she didn't have a clue what to do to help.
Yeah. Yes. Definitely. Oh, so she wasn't smart enough at all? You never
Not at
told her?
all.
Wow.
None. Yeah. So we got a great reaction out of her.
Did they tell you not to smarten her up for that reason?
Well, it wasn't that. It was just a different time. We kayfabed. It was different. We protected the business. Didn't we didn't talk we didn't talk about that stuff. And and my whole family, my grandparents and uncles and just cousins and just so many people that were fans before I got in the business and then I'm in the business, you had to protect that code of honor that had gone on, back to George Hackenschmidt and those guys.
Did you ever smarten her up?
Oh, I did, of course.
Okay. All right. I
Yeah,
was gonna say
yeah.
because she probably still hates, Nikita or hated him.
No,
Yeah.
no, no, no. She, after the accident and I was out of the scene and all that stuff, she certainly was aware of, that it was a business. And I think she was thankful that, because I think there was a lot of nights that she watched me come out looking a lot the worse for wear that she wasn't sure how long I was going to be able to do that.
Right. Yeah. The thing is, like with you, it's funny. Like before, you mentioned like with Flair, like okay, you're supposed to feud Flair, but I can't believe that they thought at 37 like he was too old. Like that's just crazy to me because I know in Kevin Sullivan, my buddies with him, he always says like through the 90s they were talking about how old Flair was, but I can't believe in the mid 80s they were saying that because my God, 87, 88, 89 might be his best year ever with Steamboat and Terry Funk. It's like, wow, why are they thinking he's too old? He's like Kevin always says, he's Dracula. He's not too old. He's just gonna keep wrestling and being great.
Well, they all they had to measure it by was people from the past, and nobody thought about athletes being able to maintain this spectacular level of performance you know through their 40s, much less their 50s. So it was a different era, and it was a transition coming into place for that. You know you're right. I mean, he and Terry Funk had some of the most amazing matches ever, when both of them would have been considered so far past their prime that if if Jim Hurt had had his way, they'd have both been sent to the glue factory.
Yeah. right? Isn't that crazy? And you had
Yeah,
Flair Steamboat, which was maybe the greatest wrestling feud of all time in '89. So, I mean, he wasn't old, and then what's he 41 at that point, 44D, I guess. So, I mean,
yeah,
that's crazy too. Even think we wouldn't have gotten that if they had their way.
yeah. So, fitness, nutrition, modern science, whatever you want to call it, just things have lended athletes to be able to go, far past what was a prime. I mean, you look at George Foreman coming out of retirement like he did, and the noise he made in the pro boxing world. So, there's been a lot of athletes that have been able to have a career way past what was traditionally considered, you know, okay. Because even in my head, I didn't want to be out there bouncing around past, I really didn't want to do it past 30. I mean, and I was only 27, and I was already thinking, 30 years old, running around out there in your Speedos, acting like Superman is it might be a little egotistical. I don't know. I would still wanted to be doing that. I had other things I wanted to do besides just wrestle.
When you go back and you look at it, like I'm always amazed at you because it's like, wow, you're like not bitter at all. Obviously, very successful. I know you have a, I think you mentioned before, but I knew it anyway. But like the job you have is very intensive. You very successful. So I mean, it's like one of the things where not bitter at all, but you could have been. And the other side of the spectrum, Ole Anderson forever was like this bitter guy. You would think something, like something really bad happened to him. Like it's just weird to think about it. It's like, wow, Magnum's not bitter at all. Like, how do you kind of I don't know, like to even me myself, if something like that happened, I'd be like, I could have been NWA world champ, or I could have been bitter, but you're not like that at all. Why is that?
Well, first of all, I got a great deal of satisfaction out of what I did. I mean, I accomplished more in a little less than 7 year window
Yeah,
than some guys that had a 30, 40 year career. And you know, I was talking to Mick Foley about this. If you have a career that you have what they have that moment, like his moment coming off the top of the cage, going through that table that people have talked about to this day. I had the I quit match with Tully that 36 years later still holds up and people still show it and study it and talk about it and it's still relevant, you know, 36 years later. And I was fortunate enough not, to have had a stellar match with and program with Wahoo McDaniels, who was arguably the greatest Native American athlete in history as far as I'm concerned, and he passed the U.S. title to me right in the middle of a sold out Charlotte Coliseum where he was legend, and then Tully, and then to have the best of seven series with Nikita. I mean, I don't know that you could feel better about it or worse about it if you'd been 15 times world heavyweight champion. Uh, I had those moments that people only dream of, where you stand in the middle of the ring and have such loud adoration coming to you. It goes like white. The noise is so deafening. It goes silent. It's so loud. And those were magic times, and it was a season of my life, and it was a memorable time, and I consider it all a blessing because the fact of the matter is I broke my neck and paralyzed from the neck down, and I'm told my chances of ever doing anything short of being able to sit in a chair and have somebody spoon feed me for the rest of my life is 1,000,000 to 1. You know, so
wow.
everything that came above and beyond that was such a huge accomplishment that I could understand because I had to come back an inch at a time from nowhere. And I never took any of that for granted. So I'm a man of faith, and I really had to test that faith during that time because when the rubber meets the asphalt, you're going to find out if you just a lot of talk or if you can implement those things that you've said and all those flowery words or not. And it sustained me, and I wanted to be a good example to people just not to give up in so many challenges of life. And that really is the reason why initially I did the things I did on television. I came back, worked a little bit as a manager or on the side, did color commentating, did some things, And it really wasn't because it was satisfying to me, because I'll tell you right now, it was not. Because being young and still, knowing you should be in your prime performing, there was very little personal gratification, satisfaction in that at all. But I wanted to be out there for people to see that I hadn't just crawled in some hole, some pity pot somewhere, and that I still had a life, and I still had to find my way, and that I wasn't giving up, and I was going to maybe not triumph the way others would view what a triumph would be. To some, anything short of coming back and reclaiming, what was, quote unquote, rightfully mine and had been predestined to happen. I count it all like this huge blessing, because here's the fact. I- I've I've fathered three children, and I've raised four additional outside of them. I've got amazing, amazing family. I got a wife that loves me, and I couldn't be where I'm at today and have done all those other things without having just a trail of travesty in my rearview mirror, and regrets and time lost from family, and things that were satisfying to me and applauded by possibly millions, but I could have lost my own soul in that process, and I'm really glad that I didn't.
Yeah, it's amazing, like what you were able to accomplish. Because, like you said, million and one shot.
Yeah, and sometimes ignorance is bliss. I was just hard-headed enough that, to me, he threw out like the gauntlet, the challenge. Oh, really? Like, you've met me 5 minutes and you're telling me what I'm capable of, or what the rest of my life's going to be like. And I'm thankful that I didn't have all that brain knowledge that he had, because I understood how devastating what I had done to myself really was. I might not have just had the grit, tenacity that it took just to fight my way out of intensive care for 30 days, and then 4 more months of intensive, work in the hospital, overcoming blood clots and everything else. uh, you know, I mean, they didn't think I was going to make it for about the first couple of weeks, much less walk out ever.
Man, scary stuff. So basically, it was it raining that night, like when the accident
It,
happened,
it,
or
it was rain. It was raining cats and dogs.
oh, was it?
And the bottom line is, I tell people, because everybody likes, say, oh, well, they were saying was alcohol involved, this involved, and I said nothing was involved. Eh, the honest truth of the fact is, I was driving too fast for the conditions. The car hydroplaned. Had it been going 15, 20 miles an hour slower, it wouldn't have happened. But I was just so accustomed, to living life in the fast lane and driving. I've driven millions of miles, literally, all over the country through horrible storms and everything else. And I wasn't taking that extra precaution and care that I probably ordinarily would have done, because it was only a few minutes from my house. So I wasn't even, my mind was on autopilot, like a horse heading to the barn. I was on a path I'd been on hundreds of times, and I was going to be there in just a few minutes, and boom, it just happened literally in the blink of an eye, and I never lost consciousness, and it was just the most surreal thing that I can remember much too vividly here, 36 years later, than than you would like.
Right? Yeah, that's so scary. My God, you, like you said, you're hard headed, you're tough, but man, just one of those things you just don't know what's going on. It's pretty scary.
Yeah.
I got to ask you about Tully, though. I know we're talking about some serious stuff, but let's talk about some happy stuff. What is the relationship like, or really, what was it like then? Because it seemed like there's got to be something there. Because you guys brawling, yes, there's been brawls before. There's been I quit matches and stuff, but I mean that's like the holy grail of them. You know what I mean? It seems like, man, these two must really hate each other, like that kind of thing.
Well, the thing, Tully and I met. I met after I'd been in the business 6 months, and I went to work for his dad, Joe Blanchard, in San Antonio. And we sat and talked. And of course, Tully, he was already a seasoned, veteran when I met him. And he told me what his desires were for the business, what he wanted to accomplish, and it was always he wanted to be the best heel straight up in the country. And not, not to be like the heel that, secretly wanted to be the baby face and get the accolades of the people. He wanted to be the best, nastiest, most dastardly hated heel that he could possibly be. And I saw that intensity in him then, and he saw something in me back then, even though I'd only been 6 months in the business. And so when I left left his dad and went down to Florida, and the next time Tully and I see each other is 3 years later. And in that 3 years, I've gone through a huge metamorphosis because I've been under the tutelage of Eddie Graham for a year and a half, and Dusty, and then Bill Watts and Superstar Bill Dundee, Ernie Ladd, the Midnight Express, the Butch Reed, Mr. Wrestling 2, all these people that had a hand on helping me develop this character. So as I come into to Crockett Promotions, he sees this intense version of a babyface that's equally as intense as he is as a heel, and he saw dollar signs immediately. I mean, his wheels were spinning right from the get go. How can I get he and I involved in something? So, on the heels of winning the U.S. title from Flair, and then subsequently, not that long after, Tully, having Baby Doll come down dressed as a police officer, hand him a roll of quarters, and knock me out cold to win the title from me in Charlotte, North Carolina, where I just won it a couple months before from Wahoo. The heat was intense from the beginning, and every match we had was just it was a Pier 6 brawl. It was just a fight. People knew we hated each other, and they knew when they saw us, in a match, it didn't matter where it was, 7 nights a week, we had that kind of match. And we did that for 8 solid months until till we came back around to the I Quit match. So we just had, I mean, I could have wrestled him in my sleep. I mean, we had that chemistry. We were both in great shape. We could go 20, 30 minutes, like completely all out, hard as you could go. And it was just a joy. And, you don't have that kind of chemistry with, just anybody. It was a special time. And, he was the perfect foil for a very brash young, guy like Magnum was.
Did you get along behind the scenes? I know obviously chemistry inside the scenes, but did you guys get along behind the scenes?
We had a very much mutual goals and respect for each other. We didn't travel in the same circles. Back then, kayfabe was huge, so heels and baby faces weren't ever really around each other. I mean, we saw each other, of course, in buildings where there might be a means of getting back and forth, but typically the dressing rooms were completely separated, and unless it was a closed group function that the Crockett's were putting on or something. We weren't that many social situations together.
He always says he never said I quit. He just said yes. Do you think that he really quit? Because it seemed like he
Oh
was
yeah,
quitting there.
oh
He
yeah.
was
He
quitting
he
there at
was
the
he
arcade.
was yeah, he was winning out of that. I mean, and it was great because I mean it gave the heel the thing to fuss about. But you got a guy, 240 plus pound guy standing over top of you with a 9-inch spike, poking in your head. You can say yes, I don't know, whatever, but it was obvious, to everybody in attendance that he wanted out of the match, and it was and again that just shows you how everything had to line up the moon and stars. I mean, we knew we were going to use a foreign object. We didn't know what it was going to be. I mean, Baby Doll just reaches under the ring, knowing there'll be something underneath there, and comes up with that wooden chair, and she's strong enough to heave it over top of that ring, in one swoop. Make no doubt, she was tougher than about 80% of the men you'd ever come across, and she flings that thing over the top of the ropes, and and Tully busts that chair up, and it comes up with just the nastiest looking weapon you could ever want to have. So you know, if you, if you just set out to do it just like that, you probably couldn't duplicate it.
Wow, that's awesome that it was just kind of spur of the moment on the spot because it looks like, oh, this is predetermined. He's going to break the chair and get the spike. Like it seems like it, but it's not at all. That's wow, that's unbelievable.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the chair wasn't gimmick, nothing. It was just a wood folding chair like they set up around the ring, and he just grabbed an extra. She grabbed an extra one and hoisted it over there. Had to get something.
Wow, good old days of just kind of calling it in the ring, huh?
Yeah, well, and everything was back then. I mean, obviously, we knew how we were going to finish it, but we had no idea when we were doing it that it was gonna have that kind of historical impact. And I mean, because really for him and I, it was just like another night of what we were used to doing every night.
Yeah. Yep. And I feel like you and Dusty, again, I know more obviously teammates, but another guy with unbelievable chemistry. Obviously, this kind of goes beyond wrestling too. You guys were best buddies.
Yeah, we were, and we had struck up that friendship down in Florida when I worked for Championship Wrestling in Florida, and and created a bond that was it was kind of like we were this connected big brother little brother kind of deal. And it's so ironic because when I when I went to Mid South to take on the role there and become Magnum TA, because that's where Magnum was born, uh, didn't know what that character really meant. Didn't know what he looked like, what he was going to do, anything other than that I had this great name that Andre the Giant had given me. So for the first 6 months that I'm there, it was a struggle because one week they'd have me dressing up in a three-piece suit, and the next week they'd have me come out in Hawaiian shirt. The next week I'd be doing something like a punk rock outfit. They really weren't sure what to do with me, and at the time Ernie Ladd was the booker. He's the one that had brought me in because Paul Orndorff had left, opened up the spot, and gone to work for the WWE. So I've been there 6 months, and Ernie comes up to me and says, "Kid, this just isn't working like we thought it was going to, and I think you ought to go back to Florida maybe for a little bit or something." And I called Dusty up and I said, "Man," I said, "I guess this thing isn't going to work out like I thought." And he said, "What do you think?" He said, "Well," he said, "I know you always like to ride motorcycles because I'd ridden motorcycles since I was 16 years old." And he said, "Go buy you a Harley and come down to Florida, bring it back to Florida, and we'll have you take that Harley and ride it into the towns, and we're going to make you the lone wolf Magnum TA, different vibe, different deal." So Jim Duggan takes me down, and we go to Baton Rouge Harley Davidson, buy this brand new Harley, buy this Harley Davidson jacket, and I'm wrestling in a little town outside of Baton Rouge. So I ride up into the town on the motorcycle, and everybody's humming. All the people are just like buzzing, like some whole different cat's pulled up. And I go in the dressing room wearing that leather jacket, and everybody like looking at me completely different than they had for 6 months. Same guy coming in the door, and so I felt the whole persona changing, and I was getting ready to, do my little time and get out of there and pack my bags and go to Florida. And Bill Watts sees me and says, "Oh, no, 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 you're not going anywhere. I got big plans for you." And he brought Dundee in, whatever. But long story short, Dusty always had that vision of creating something big. And so the jacket that's represented in the figure, which had never been done, is truly a huge pivot point for me and changing just the whole vibe of what this character was all about. And it enabled me just to kind of like, Fonzie and the Happy Days back in the day, the leather jacket
Yes.
gave
Yes.
him the vibe. Well, it did the same thing to me, and it gave me all of a sudden I started being comfortable in portraying this character that was bigger than life. That was really just a magnification of something I was very comfortable in myself. and that's what made it all happen. And Dusty was just sitting back watching it, laughing because he knew he was going to bring me back to Florida, with all that. So then he watches me have this great ride for the next year, and he in turn came to work for the Crockett's, and things didn't start out like he thought they were going to start out, and it was a little rough there. And Barry Windham had come in as the big babyface star, and they were starving. Those guys just weren't making any money, and Barry just up and left and went to New York and left them high and dry, and which was not well thought of by a lot of folks at that moment, as you can imagine.
Yep.
And Dusty calls me in the middle of the night, puts Jim Crockett on the phone with me, introduces us, and he says, if come take a chance on us, we will give you the greatest opportunity you could ever want to have in this business. And they did. They were good to their word, and I left a place that was on fire, and we were selling out every night, and I'd had my first six-figure year in the business, and to go to a place where guys weren't hardly making enough money to buy beanie weenies, and but they took care of me from day one, and they gave me the keys to the Emerald City.
And the Horsemen start, racking themselves up, becoming huge heels. And you and Dusty were great foes for the Horsemen. I mean, it just goes perfectly together.
We were, and then there was those James Boys guys. They were kind of interesting too. Uh, the our alter ego,
Yes.
uh, and it America's team, and we had just started playing with all that because it was like easy. That was like some things you had to work hard at, but that was just him and I together was just like a magic chemistry. So I mean, I could go in there and do the heavy lifting part of the match, and he could sell like nobody's business, and between the two of us, it was just a very unique combo. And again, it was like my big brother kind of deal. That's where we came up with the Frank and Jesse from, because he was always Frank and I was always Jesse before we ever came up with the James Boys, and that was our little code word thing. Uh, so 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 anyway, it was yeah, it was a great relationship. It was uh, huge impact on my career. While I was there in the ring, and then afterwards the friendship carried on for a lifetime.
Yeah, it's funny, like what happens. Obviously, you're with your career, but the relationship never changes. Like, you're in ring, but he brings you to WCW, right? And then you start working behind the scenes. So he kind of always was with you and always buddies with you. And then obviously everybody remembers that awesome moment when he teams with Nikita and you make that surprise appearance at a Crockett Cup. I mean, the emotion, the crowd. I mean, that's crazy too. So it seems like you and Dusty were always hand in hand, no matter what.
Yeah, no matter what. And I got to see him so ironically as this is, he passed away on my birthday. So I
Wow.
can't ever forget that. But the November before, we did there was an event up in New York at LaGuardia where they have a fan fest convention kind of thing annually, and my youngest son and I drove up to be a part of it, and the promoter that brought me in had brought Dusty in, so we got to sit together for about 4 hours and like really reminisce about a lot of cool things, and we got to meet my son, and just he was big. He was so huge on family. He loved his kids and his grandkids, and he really mellowed out over time, and what a great teacher he ended up being for all those kids at the NXT, because that's what he called them, his kids, because he mentored all of them. I mean, Charlotte Flair and Seth Rollins, and just countless folks that came through that system were all had the touch of Dusty put on them, and he was just amazing at helping people find what their inner mojo is to come out of your shell and be able to present this character to the world because that's what he'd done. He'd been a study his whole life. He'd watched the great ones, and he'd taken a little from this one, a little from that one, and molded some of his own magic around it. And then he got to where he was a teacher, he could help other people find that within themselves.
With that too, obviously you're Cody's godfather. So I mean, you're literally, I mean, family, right?
Right, right. So yeah, I was there the night he was born, and I was there holding him at his christening in Tampa, Florida. So yeah, the ties with he and I, and the family, and Michelle are deep.
What do you think about your godson Cody Rhodes today? Like, what do you think about him in WWE today, kicking ass? I know he's injured, but like, what do you think about his run before, AEW and then WWE and kind of blowing it up at WrestleMania?
I saw him when he had left the WWE and was working recreating himself in the indie world
Yep.
before AEW. And he was always so laser focused that he had a purpose, he had a plan, and and he reinvented himself after he had to overcome the you know the characters things that he portrayed in the WWE that he was just not happy with, and he had tried so hard to pitch them other ideas and other things to give him some depth to do something else, and they didn't see it. They didn't see him capable of it. So he's just this great story of self promotion and overcoming the quote unquote experts, and then you mold all that athleticism that he's got and his storytelling ability and then his business mind. I mean, he's truly the triple threat. And his dad, I know, could just not be more proud of what he's gone on to do, and now Cody's a dad, and I know when he comes back from this injury, he's going to cement yet another chapter in his life and his career in the industry.
Speaking about family, how's Tessa Blanchard? How is she doing? What's the latest
She
with her?
she's doing fantastic. She has uh, enrolled in college in San Antonio, Texas, and is working on a degree there, and still maintaining her workout regime, and still wrestling some indie things on the weekends. But Tessa's always been like a really sharp study of life, and she realizes that first of all, from a woman's perspective, 40 probably truly is the stretch. You've stretched it about as far as you comfortably want to go and be taking bumps in the ring and putting your body through that stuff. So she saw what it takes to be on the grand stage and the big stage of it, but knows that you've got to have an end game plan and something that's not just got you tunnel vision focused at one thing, and then one thing go wrong and you don't have anything to fall back on. So she's preparing herself for her future, and I'm really proud of her. She's in the best shape of her life, and by the time she with the things that she pre-qualified in with courses and things she'd already taken, in probably 3.5 years she'll be out and still be a young woman and still have probably the opportunities of a lifetime in front of her if that's still the path she wants to pursue.
As we hit the wind down, we head towards the finish here. Just give us one last big push for PowerTown Wrestling and maybe like what's next and where everybody can find it.
Well, PowerTownWrestling.com, where everybody can find it, and there is so much, so many stories yet to be told from this venture. The rebirth of legends to a new generation, uh, and an ongoing adaptation of what the just the amazing people that help build this industry that is still flourishing so well today is going to be something that we're going to be able to relay to the old wrestling fans, new wrestling fans, or people that are just really interested in understanding the history of where it all came from. And in doing so, we're going to create unique lines of collectible items. The action figures are certainly, something that is going to continue in the line over and over until we've represented the people we have on this roster. But we've got other really unique things in mind that I think the fans will be excited about and be happy to be able to get their hands on. So we're thinking outside the box a little bit and yeah, try to be creative and do justice to these people that deserve to have their own reckoning in modern time. I can imagine a young Mad Dog Vachon running roughshod through the likes of the locker room at the WWE right now. It would be a thing of beauty, and I would, I chuckle as I think about it. But all those guys paid their dues, paved the way, uh, and made what's happening today possible by their just hundreds of thousands of miles going up and down the road and wrestling whether they're hurt, whether they felt like it or not, and doing everything in their power to continue to entertain generation after generation of wrestling fan.
Now, for Magnum TA, when you look back at it, I know obviously the figure is going to be immortalized forever. Everybody's going to love these awesome collectible figures. They look like $1 million. But what do you think is your legacy? Like, if somebody's looking at that figure and, in the future, like, what are they going to think of Magnum TA?
I hope they'll see somebody that isn't just the sum of his exterior parts. Um, you can't measure somebody by the amount of weights they can press or the amount of dollars they've put in the bank. There's a grit that is an intangible that I've tried to be my motto my entire life to not not make excuses, but see things as challenges and embrace those challenges in a positive light. And I've done my best to do that and continue to face challenges each and every day. Some that should make me cry, but I can still find humor in them, and I apply that same philosophy each and every morning. My feet hit the floor, and I go get up and do the same thing all over again. And I just hope they see someone that was inspiring of sorts, and maybe makes your challenges look like something that you can face and overcome on your own without having to, ever think about saying I quit.
Love it. Just one final question. Do you have a favorite John Wayne movie?
Uh, True Grit was probably my favorite.
It's a good one. I love The Shootist, but True Grit's awesome as well. Where can everybody find you? Social media? I know obviously you're on Twitter and stuff, but where can everybody find you?
Well, I will eventually link it all to our PowerTown website part when it gets all up and running. But I'm on Instagram. Uh, I think it's Magnum Terry Allen Magnum TA on Instagram. It's the real Magnum TA on Twitter. And goodness, I don't even look at those things so much even to know. But if you search it up, it'll be easy to tell it's me because I have a very entertaining, uh, colorful bunch of things on my website with my kids and family and extracurricular things that we do. So I'll be easy to find.
Awesome. Well, Magnum, thank you so much for all the time today. Really appreciate it.
It was a pleasure as always, and thank you for all the accolades.